Angela was new to the city and desperate for a good deal. After months of saving and scrimping, she finally had enough to furnish her tiny apartment. Craigslist seemed like the perfect place to start. Among the usual posts of used furniture, one ad stood out: antique mirror, $50, must sell quickly. The mirror looked exquisite, with intricate carvings around its frame, and at $50, it was a steal. Angela contacted the seller immediately. The response was swift: an address and a time, tonight. The address led her to an older part of town she hadn't ventured to before. Dilapidated houses lined the streets, but the one she arrived at seemed in better condition. It was a grand, Victorian-era house that stood tall and imposing under the dim streetlight. As she approached the door, an uneasy feeling washed over her. She knocked, and after a few moments, the door creaked open to reveal a frail, elderly woman with a kind yet weary smile. "Hello, dear. You must be Angela. Come in," she said. Angela hesitated, but the woman's gentle demeanor reassured her. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a soft thud. The interior of the house was just as grand as the exterior, albeit with an air of neglect. Dust covered every surface, and the air felt heavy. The old woman led Angela to a room at the back of the house. "There it is," she said, pointing to the mirror. Angela's breath caught in her throat. The mirror was even more beautiful in person, but it also radiated an eerie aura. The carvings on the frame seemed to twist and writhe in the flickering light. She couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching her. The old woman noticed her discomfort. "It's a family heirloom," she explained, "but I need to sell it. Bad memories." Angela didn't press further. She handed over the $50, and the woman helped her load the mirror into her car. "Be careful with it," the old woman warned as Angela drove away, "and never, ever look into it at night." Back in her apartment, Angela hung the mirror on the wall opposite her bed. Exhausted from the day, she collapsed into bed and fell asleep almost instantly. She awoke in the middle of the night, a cold sweat drenching her sheets. Something felt wrong. She glanced at the clock. 3 a.m. A strange sound, like whispering, filled the room. Her eyes drifted to the mirror. In the dim light, she saw a reflection, but it wasn't her. The figure in the mirror had her face, but the eyes were wrong, cold, empty, and staring directly at her. Angela's heart pounded in her chest. She remembered the old woman's warning and quickly turned away, pulling the covers over her head. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying for sleep to take her. The next few days were a blur of unease and paranoia. Angela avoided the mirror as much as possible, but its presence was always felt. At night, the whispers returned, growing more coherent, more commanding. On the third night, she couldn't resist. The voice called to her, a siren song she couldn't ignore. She sat up in bed, her eyes drawn to the mirror. The reflection was waiting for her. "Help me," it mouthed. Angela felt a strange compulsion to obey. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the mirror. The surface was ice cold. Her reflection's hand met hers, and for a moment, it felt like she was touching flesh. Suddenly, the reflection's face twisted into a grotesque grin. Angela yanked her hand back, but it was too late. The mirror shattered, shards flying everywhere. Pain erupted in her hand where a piece of glass had embedded itself. From that night on, Angela's life spiraled into a nightmare. She started seeing things, shadows moving in the corners of her vision, figures standing at the foot of her bed. The whispers never stopped. They grew louder, more aggressive, demanding her attention. Desperate, she tried to get rid of the mirror. She took it down, wrapped it in a blanket, and drove to the nearest junkyard. She threw it onto a pile of debris and watched as it was crushed by a bulldozer. Relief washed over her as she drove home, but that night, the whispers were louder than ever. She bolted upright in bed, and there it was, the mirror, back on her wall, whole and unblemished. Angela knew she was losing her mind. She went back to the old house, determined to find answers. The old woman greeted her at the door, as if expecting her. "I tried to get rid of it," Angela said, her voice shaking. The old woman nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You can't. It's bound to you now." Angela's heart sank. "What do you mean?" The old woman sighed. "The mirror was cursed long ago. It traps souls, feeds on their fears. It will never let you go." Despair enveloped Angela. She begged the woman for a solution, but there was none. The only escape was death. That night, Angela made her decision. She couldn't live like this anymore. She took a deep breath, glanced at the mirror one last time, and saw her reflection smiling, a smile that wasn't her own. She grabbed the largest shard of glass from the initial break and ended it all, hoping for peace. But as her life ebbed away, she realized the truth. Her soul was now part of the mirror, another whisper in the chorus, waiting for the next victim to answer its call.